In pursuit of the meaning of the numbers Kevin found under Starry Night, Kevin and Phoebe traveled to Lyon, France, where they encountered billionaire Nigel Hodges. Although Nigel had a reputation for environmentalism and philanthropy, Kevin quickly realizes that Nigel is actually a greedy hypocrite, doing everything from wearing baby sealskin to attempting insurance fraud by burning down the Lumiere Brothers Museum, which he had recently purchased. Fortunately, Kevin thwarted the attempted arson and saved the museum's archives, although the rest of the museum's contents have gone missing. The next day, Kevin, Phoebe, and Pierre Lafont, the film historian and former museum employee, returned to the Lumiere Brothers Museum. Kevin still had no idea how the sequence of numbers he had found behind Van Gogh's painting could get him to the portal to the upper realm. But Phoebe suspected that the numerical sequence was a patent number for one of the Lumiere brothers' early contributions to filmmaking technology. Though Nigel's film had reflected his hypocrisy and the fire at the museum had distracted Kevin, he and Phoebe knew that this was their grail, and they must now devote their attention to figuring out this mystery. Fortunately, the museum's archives were in the attic, high above the museum's theater, where Kevin had to break a water pipe in order to extinguish smoldering piles of gunpowder to prevent the entire theater from exploding. Kevin happily wrote Pierre a check in order to not only repair the minor water damage, but also to upgrade the entire museum, including its disorganized archives. However, even money couldn't immediately solve Kevin's current problem. Kevin, Phoebe, and Pierre stared at an attic stuffed to the rafters with paperwork and various items of every description and no particular organization. To make matters worse, Phoebe and Pierre had caused further chaos in their attempt to save as much of the archives as possible when the records were threatened by possible arson the night before. Phoebe picked a few yellowed pieces of paper up off the ground and glanced at them. "If there isn't kind of any organizational system at all," she told Pierre, "I can't figure it out."
"But, mademoiselle, the organizational structure is quite simple," Pierre told her. "It is based on an ingenious combination of the Napoleonic Code, the metric system, and the French classifications of cheese."
"Perhaps it would be faster if we showed you what we are looking for," Kevin suggested. He showed Pierre a set of numbers. "These numbers are similar to a patent number we found on a hand-crank cinema camera made in Lyon by the Lumiere brothers." "See, the first set of digits in the patent number are the same," Phoebe explained, "along with the set in the middle." "And this set at the end could be the date the patent was filed," Kevin finished.
Oui, I see," Pierre nodded enthusiastically. "You are very observant, Kevin. You are absolutely right. The number at the end is the date the patent was filed, and we'll be able to look up all the Lumiere patents by date in the patent book."
"That's wonderful," Phoebe exclaimed. She looked around the chaotic room. How do we find the patent book?"
"We do that by consulting the Inventions Index," Pierre informed her.
"And we find the Inventions Index how?" Kevin asked.
"By looking it up in the card catalog," Pierre answered.
"I just saw the card catalog." Phoebe stepped around a towering stack of cardboard file boxes. There she found a cabinet made entirely of drawers, measuring 3 inches by 5 inches. But when she opened a drawer and looked inside, she found it was full of glass picture negatives.
No, the card catalog is right here."
Pierre held up what appeared to be the world's largest hat box. He removed the lid with a flourish and showed them a loose pile of index cards. Kevin and Phoebe traded looks. "At least it's somewhere to start," Kevin said with a shrug. Between Kevin's super speed, Pierre's knowledge of the catalog, and Phoebe's natural knack for turning chaos into order, they found the necessary filing card, invention index, and patent book before lunch. Pierre tapped the pertinent page with a finger.
"Here is the invention that matches the numbers you gave me, Kevin. It is the patent number for Lumiere's invention of a very special kind of camera."
"What made it so special?" Kevin wondered.
They only made one of them. I don't think it was ever used very much, but the brothers kept it carefully for years. We had it here in the museum." Pierre sighed, thinking of all the museum's stolen treasures. "But who knows where it is now?" Kevin smiled grimly. "Nigel Hodges. That's who knows where it is now." But when they inquired at Nigel's hotel, they were told that Nigel had left the night before, flying out solo on his private jumbo 747, even though it was practically empty. Kevin decided that the next best thing would be to speak to the mayor. "The mayor?" Pierre questioned. "Why would that little bootlicker know anything about where Nigel took my museum's camera? I spit in his vague direction." And Pierre did just that. He spat in the wind to show his disgust. "Because he mentioned that Nigel was bringing green industries to Lyon," Kevin explained. "Since Nigel's plane was empty, it stands to reason that he didn't take the contents of the museum with him. They must still be here in Lyon somewhere." The mayor was delighted to see Kevin again and shook his hand enthusiastically. "Monsieur Williams, I was actually on my way to see you just now." As always, Kevin was amused rather than flattered by an official's fawning attention. "Really? Why is that?" "After your heroic efforts to save the historic soul of the Lyon film industry, the Lumiere Museum, the board of directors of the International Lyon Film Festival have decided to rename their grand prize in your honor. From now on, it will be known as the Palme de Williams. We'd like to present it at our closing ceremonies." "I'd be happy to oblige if I'm still in town," Kevin told him. "But the reason I came to you today is that I'm curious about the green industries you mentioned that Hodges was bringing to Lyon." "Of course. Perhaps you are interested in investing some of Monsieur Hodges' companies yourself." Kevin could see the mayor mentally calculating the increase to the city's tax coffers. Unfortunately, if Nigel Hodges would stoop to arson and the destruction of a historic monument, tax evasion was surely not beneath him. "Yes, I'm extremely interested in taking a very close look at Nigel's investments in the community here," Kevin assured him. "Could you get me a list of all of the properties he's purchased recently in Lyon?" Kevin and Phoebe left Pierre to return to his beloved archives, promising to inform him immediately if they were able to recover any of the museum's missing artifacts. Kevin had only needed a glance at the list that the mayor had supplied to figure out which location was most likely to be where Nigel stashed the items he had planned to report as lost in the fire at the museum to his insurance company, and then try to sell on the black market for cash. It was a large, isolated warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Once at the warehouse, Kevin had Phoebe stay in the car. Although the warehouse was old and run down, it had recently acquired a brand new double set of 10-foot electrified chain-link fences, crash barriers that would have made the United Nations proud, and a state-of-the-art video security system. Kevin imagined it was also heavily guarded by an armed security force, even though no guards were visible from the outside. Phoebe was happy to agree. She had no interest in going inside the warehouse. Although she had been on several of Kevin's adventures, she was not by nature a fighter. Unlike Kevin, she didn't have any martial arts training or leveled abilities. Kevin crept as close to the fence as he could, crouching low in the overgrown grass and shrubs. Although Nigel claimed to be an environmentalist, the area around his new warehouse was littered with discarded materials from the fence's construction, everything from tangles of wire to rusting metal poles. Kevin was just wondering if he was going to have to risk exposing himself to the security cameras in order to get over the fence, when he sensed an animal in distress nearby. Kevin crept through the long grass until he found a large raven bleeding on the ground. The raven was in pain and distress. Like all of its kind, it had been attracted to a shiny object, but that object had turned out to be barbed wire, which had ensnared the bird, tangling in its feathers and tearing its delicate skin. Kevin reached out with his mind and connected to the raven. He soothed its distress and promised it help. The raven allowed Kevin to untangle the barbed wire gently. Then Kevin cleaned its wounds with a healing salve from his ever-present satchel of herbal remedies.
He broke open a recovery pill, measured out an amount appropriate to the raven, and mixed it in a little water. The thirsty raven gulped down the water and hopped to its feet, clearly already healed almost entirely. The raven sent waves of gratitude to Kevin. Kevin sensed that the raven was anxious to return the favor in any way possible. Kevin immediately thought of a way the raven and its friends could help him. Kevin reached out to the raven again and communicated his needs. The raven let out a caw that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Within moments, dozens of ravens had flocked to the warehouse. They perched on eaves and ledges, stretching their wings and fluffing out their feathers. Kevin's new friends were now blocking every single security camera on this side of the building. Kevin could now breach the fence without any of the guards being the wiser, but he would have to hurry before anyone came to shoo the birds away by hand. Kevin seized one of the rusting poles from the ground. He held it by one end over his shoulder and ran straight at the fence, picking up immense momentum with every stride. A few feet from the fence, Kevin stabbed the end of the pole onto the ground and allowed it to act like a lever, propelling him up into the air like a pole vaulter. Kevin easily cleared the 10-foot double fence, turned a double somersault in the air, and landed lightly on the far side. He raced to the side of the building, plastering himself against it where no cameras could see him. With his mind, he sent a sincere thank you to all his feathered friends and urged them to go about their business and avoid this place and all its shiny dangers in the future. His dismissal came not a moment too soon. As the ravens took wing, guards began pouring from the warehouse. Kevin immediately sensed there were no normal security guards. Each and every one of them was a highly leveled fighter. And as they continued to pour through the building, Kevin realized that there were at least 300 of them. Kevin and Phoebe traveled to Lyon, France to find out how the mysterious Starry Night number sequence is related to early film pioneers the Lumiere brothers. Kevin learned from a French film expert that the sequence matches a patent number for a rare moving picture camera that had been part of the Lumiere Museum. However, billionaire Nigel Hodges had moved the museum's contents to a heavily fortified warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Kevin used his ability to communicate with a flock of ravens to gain access to the warehouse's yard, but he is now facing down 300 security guards, all of whom have levels. Kevin knew he had only moments before the leveled security guards realized he was there. He focused all his power and jumped straight up at the wall of the warehouse. The warehouse was old, and the settling of the foundation had caused the bricks to shift and buckle over the years. Kevin's fingertips found the tiniest holds as he scaled straight up the side of the warehouse until he reached an open window 30 feet above the ground. Kevin perched on the windowsill and stared at the huge interior of the warehouse. The vast space was full of an untidy jumble of boxes and crates of all descriptions. It was far more than the little Lumiere Museum could possibly have held. Apparently, Nigel Hodges had been stockpiling rare goods and antiques from all over Lyon in this warehouse. Kevin silently leapt to a nearby crate, dropping in stages until he reached the warehouse floor again. He ducked behind a few large Klieg lights, the kind used to send beams of light into the sky at film premieres. Kevin didn't have time to search the entire warehouse box by box. He needed to find that camera as soon as possible. As his mind raced, Kevin thought back to everything the Night King had told him about reaching the upper realm, where Kevin's levels would be even further refined. The Night King believed that this was Kevin's fate. If that was so, then whatever power the camera had should call out to Kevin's levels. Kevin stretched out all of his senses, allowing the still, certain core of himself to seek the camera, wherever it may be. He received back the tiniest twinge. Anyone less experienced than Kevin would have missed it or mistaken it for their imagination. But Kevin knew better. This really was his destiny. Kevin followed his senses to a far corner of the warehouse. Here, the boxes and crates were even older. Kevin saw signs that the objects in this area had come from the Lumiere Museum. There were stacks of bulky film canisters and framed movie posters leaning against each other. He honed his senses even further and found his target. It was an ancient, battered tin box, an ancestor to the heavy plastic cases the film industry now used for its most expensive equipment. Kevin grabbed it. There was no time to check the contents right now, but he was sure this case held the rare Lumiere camera the French film expert Pierre Lafont had told Kevin about. But just as Kevin was turning to go, a shout came.
"Hey, you! You're not supposed to be here! Drop that case!"
The leveled security guards had returned to the inside of the warehouse, and they had just spotted Kevin. Kevin had hoped to get out of the warehouse without being noticed, but it was too late for that now. Although he was outnumbered 300 to 1, he was still certain that he would be victorious. The first 20 guards rushed at Kevin, using their level powers to leap across the stacked crates, coming at Kevin from every direction. Kevin dodged them all, deflecting blows from their fists and feet with his free hand, as his other hand cradled the old case containing the delicate camera. One guard went down after another. Kevin's blows crushed bones and ruptured organs. He scooped up a stack of empty film canisters and whipped them at the guards' heads like frisbees. Each canister found its target, cracking skulls from the force Kevin put into each throw. Kevin didn't wait for the next group of guards to come to him. He was surrounded by too many precious antiques to risk them being damaged by flying bodies. Kevin bounded forward, bouncing from crate to crate, creating a moving target that the other guards had difficulty following. A few were able to grab for him, but even Kevin's glancing blows broke their fingers to splinters.
"Secure the exits! Lock down the doors!" one guard yelled. "Once we have him cornered, he can't fight us all."
Kevin didn't even pause. He only moved faster, heading back for the window that he had originally come through.
"He's an idiot," another guard yelled. "We already closed that window."
It was true. The window Kevin had come in was now locked down. The leveled guards crowded in, climbing onto crates and boxes, perching like vultures and grinning down at Kevin.
"We've got you now, mon ami," the first guard yelled.
"I wasn't heading for the window," Kevin informed the guard as he and the others closed in.
"Yeah? Then what?"
the guard laughed.
"This!"
Kevin turned on one of the huge Klieg lights. The high-powered light fired a powerful glare into their eyes, blinding many of the guards.
"That still won't work on all of us," the second guard yelled.
"I wasn't finished," Kevin added mildly. He reached deep within himself to the core of his being from which his level 7 abilities took their power. He sent a blast of that cold blue light out at the guards in a flickering, pulsing wave. The strobing blue light combined with the white glare of the Klieg light caused a flood of brain waves to jolt through the guards' minds. They all began to shudder as seizures ripped through their bodies. The guards perched on the crates tumbled down, unable to control their shaking bodies. The guards on the ground flopped onto their backs, teeth snapping, in danger of biting their own tongues off. Satisfied, Kevin snapped off the Klieg light and calmly picked his way through the mass of writhing, shaking bodies. He reached the main doors of the warehouse and unlocked them by the simple action of kicking them from their hinges. Several hours later, the guards who had survived their encounter with Kevin had been carted off to hospitals and prisons by the Lyon authorities. Kevin was unsurprised to discover that much of the warehouse's contents had been stolen or reported as destroyed in various fires and burglaries to insurance agencies. Pierre and Phoebe gathered close to Kevin to watch as he opened the camera case. Just as Pierre said, the patent number on the little brass plate on the camera matched the sequence Kevin had discovered in Van Gogh's Starry Night painting. "Well, we figured out what the numbers under Starry Night mean," Phoebe mused. "But how will this camera tell you where the portal to the upper realm is?" "I'm not sure yet," Kevin replied. "Maybe there's some kind of clue inside it." Kevin carefully opened up the antique camera. The camera was ancient and seemed to use a much different film process than any modern camera Kevin had ever seen. The space where the camera's film went was empty. "Pierre, is there anything else you can tell me about this camera?" Pierre shrugged.
"There is not much more to know, Kevin. Although the Lumiere brothers kept that camera safe for many years, they rarely ever used it. Only 4 films were ever shot on it.
Do you know which ones? Phoebe asked.
I do.
Pierre handed Kevin a list of the 4 films.
Unfortunately, only 3 of these films are still part of the museum. The 4th film was sold along with many other treasures of the French film industry during World War II to help fund the resistance.
Do you know who bought them? Kevin asked.
Of course. It was Jack Warner of Warner Brothers Studios in Hollywood.
Kevin realized that he was going to have to do a lot more research on this camera. But Lily's gender reveal party was coming up fast and he had promised to be back in Chicago for it. Pierre, would it be possible for me to take this camera back to America with me? The mayor of Lyon overheard and began to splutter.
Monsieur Williams, as much as the city of Lyon appreciates everything you have done for us, that camera is still the property of Monsieur Nigel Hodges. He is the one who bought the Lumiere Museum and all of its contents.
Your Monsieur Hodges is a hypocrite, howled Pierre.
He planned to burn the whole museum down for the insurance money and then sell the museum's contents on the black market. C'est impossible. Monsieur Hodges is a billionaire environmentalist and philanthropist. He would never do something like that, the mayor protested. There must be some bad seed in his organization who did all of this. Regardless, Pierre continued, this property was part of a crime, so now it falls under the care of the city, which means the city can allow Monsieur Williams to take it with him back to America. I'm sure he would be happy to sign a receipt for it.
It would only be a loan, Kevin assured them. I will return the camera in the exact same condition I received it in. The mayor continued to grumble, but after Kevin wrote another enormous check to support the expansion of the museum, he happily agreed that Kevin could do anything he wanted with the camera. Kevin and Phoebe passed the Lumiere Museum on their way to the airport to return to Chicago. Pierre had resumed projecting the old Lumiere films against the side of the building, and Kevin found himself unconsciously stopping the car in order to stare at them again. Phoebe had to call his name several times in order to snap him out of it so they wouldn't miss their flight. A flight back to see Lily, Kevin's beloved, and to welcome the news of whether they would be having a baby boy or a baby girl.